Welcome to the Feed Your Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Jill Dobrowanski. This is a space where I sit down with friends and share stories of hope and encouragement with a whole lot of Jesus sprinkled in. At Feed Your Spirit, I like to say that we are imperfectly perfect people who are uplifting others through grace-filled encouragement. I am so happy you joined me today. As we walk with determination to consciously live in God's Word, I invite you to plug in, prepare your heart, and feed your spirit. On today's episode, I talk with my friend and fellow called creative, Caitie Fredrickson. Caitie is a wife, pup mom to a very curious mini dachshund, writer, and a fierce Christian. Caitie also lives with bipolar disorder, a chronic lifelong condition. We talk about her walk with God through her struggles to be diagnosed, daily life with a serious mental illness, and how it has been an always but God mindset, which gets her through the rough times. I love Caitie's honesty and her ability to laugh when faced with adversity. If you or anyone you know is struggling with mental illness or thoughts of suicide, I urge you to reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or seek assistance from local counseling services. And remember, as Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 4:17, "For these light and momentary afflictions are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." I hope you enjoy today's episode as much as I do. Let's feed our spirit. So excited to have you on and to hear more about your story, which we'll dive into in a little bit. But first, why don't you start by telling my Feed Your Spirit listeners a little bit about yourself, kind of like that Polaroid snapshot?
Okay. Well, I am a middle 20-something wife and dog mom. No human children yet, but we do have a little miniature dachshund, Baron, who's our baby. I am married to my husband, Sam. We've been married for 5 years, and he is a student right now studying the Old Testament and Hebrew, and I don't know, he's really smart. I don't really totally understand what he's doing or going to do, but he's smart. And then by day, I am a property manager for Airbnbs in the Boise, Idaho area. And that's what I spend my time doing. We live here in Washington State, Southwest Washington, near Portland, Oregon.
So I also know that you are embarking on a new creative endeavor. So talk to me a little bit about writing and what made you get the decision or the bug to want to write.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've enjoyed being creative with writing and words. And, when I was younger, I did a lot of like poetry and short stories, but in college I took a nonfiction writing class and I really loved it. And it was kind of like working on memoirs and things like that in the class. And, so I've dabbled in it for a while and I've finally decided, you know what, I'm just going to start putting it out there. So I don't really know where I'm headed or what I'm going to do, but I'm just enjoying sharing words about my thoughts on mental health and the American church and Christianity, and just thinking about things that are interesting, I guess, to me, and sharing those thoughts with other people and hoping that they're interested too. So I'm on Instagram. That's it. And just sharing that under an account called Caitie Writes. So
I love it. I love it. And that's actually what caught my attention was that we were in part of a bigger group on Facebook prior to this. And then now we're part of called Creatives. And then you would put out a post one day about mental health and the way that the church approaches it and treats it. That really caught my attention. So what kind of led you into wanting to bring this to the forefront and talk about mental health and the way that the church really pretty much has a warped view of it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, really it was just my own personal experience. So I guess I'll just kind of dive right in with how that came to be. But I grew up in a Christian home and a family of very strong believers several generations back. And from the time I was a very young child, I had mental health issues. I can remember being 3 years old and having my first really anxiety attack. We didn't know that was what it was at the time. And just growing up, I just knew that I was different than other kids. I had a very keen sense that other kids didn't feel the way I did about things. They didn't feel as much and they didn't feel as often. And I didn't really know what was wrong with me, and I definitely felt flawed. And it was also kind of a secret because I'm a bubbly, happy person, and so I always put off that persona in public, and I was very well liked by teachers and, Sunday school leaders and my parents and everybody. I just had this good face mask that I wore to the world, and inside I was very troubled and very depressed and struggled a lot. And my parents knew, and they knew it wasn't normal. And they kept saying, what can we do for you? What's wrong? And they sought help. We went to therapists and psychologists. They had me tested for all kinds of stuff. But because I wore this mask so well, everybody said, she's fine. There's nothing wrong. But I had huge emotional outbursts. Really temper tantrums, but it was more than that. It was like I couldn't deal with my emotions. My parents were like, this is not normal. And so it wasn't until I was 19 and I was in college in Chicago. I'm from Boise, Idaho, and I was 2,000 miles away from home in Chicago, Illinois, going to college. And I had just kind of crashed one semester. The previous year, my freshman year of college, had been really good, but I came back my sophomore year and I was just not right. And I was sleeping all day, missing most of my classes, horribly depressed, thinking about suicide all the time. And so finally I had to get some help, and I checked myself into the mental hospital. And 3 stays in the mental hospital later, and a year and a half later, they said, we think you have bipolar disorder. And I was like, I don't even really know what that is. But it was really those experiences. And then after being diagnosed and learning to live with that diagnosis and sharing in the church about my struggles and becoming more open, kind of taking that mask off, I realized that people didn't understand at all. And there was a lot of stigma, not just in the church, just in general, in society, I think, but especially within the church. And I am a feisty person. And so I was like, well, this is not okay with me. So I'm just going to start sharing about the way that people with mental health should be treated. So I did. So that's kind of what got me into all of that in a brief nutshell.
That's great. As a psychology major in college myself, I feel for you because, like you said, just the stigma that goes along with that, not only, like you said, in our church, but in our society is so huge. And then you add on the expectations, like you said, wearing that mask. And then also the shame of it is, that's what it is, that society makes us feel ashamed and wants us to hide what and how we're feeling. Or if there is a diagnosed disorder, we don't talk about that. And so how have you been received, not only within your family, but from the outside world when you are bold and honest and vulnerable and are sharing about these big issues?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for my family, the diagnosis was a relief more than anything because, at this point it had been, almost 20 years that we had been struggling as a family in silence. Not in silence. My parents had looked for help, but nobody could help us. And so to finally say, oh my gosh, we were right. There was something wrong and now we can fix it was like such a weight off of my family, and a lot of healing happened there in our family relationships. Just by being able to work together instead of feeling like we were all going our separate ways, just trying to survive. So that was positive. And there was a lot of positive support too. My girlfriends at college because I ended up having to move home and not finish the semester and never came back out to Chicago. I stayed in Boise, and my girlfriends at college were so supportive of me. They sent me care packages, they sent me letters, people checked up on me. And so that was amazing. And I think the first response was just overwhelmingly positive, especially because I was actively suicidal, and that scared people, I think. And so they wanted to be extra supportive. But as time went on and I started learning, you know, bipolar disorder is a lifelong diagnosis. There's no cure. And it's not something that you get over and are better one day. And so it's not really learning how to like get through it. It's learning how to live alongside it. And people didn't get that. It was like in the church, people expected me like, okay, well, once you're better, then you can be in ministry. Once you're better, then you can teach Sunday school. But there was definitely this attitude of like, people who are mentally ill have they need to get right with God. And then once they're right with God, then you can come back and have a normal life. But there's nothing wrong with me and God. There's nothing wrong. I just have a chemical imbalance in my brain, and this is just who I am. And sometimes I have good days and sometimes I have good months. And bipolar disorder is a cyclical disorder, you know, so you have periods of mania or like intense euphoria and productivity. And then you have periods of depression, which looks like regular depression. You know, you can't get out of bed, you're depressed. For me, a lot of suicidal ideation. And so there was definitely this idea of like, well, if you're depressed right now, you can't be involved. You can't do any ministry. You can't be a spokesperson for the Lord. You just need to take that home and get that right with God. And then you can come back and be a part of this. And that was hurtful. It was really hurtful because like I said, I'm feisty and I'm outspoken and I've always been a leader. And so it was really hard for me to understand why people thought I couldn't keep doing those things just because I had a mental illness, because I knew I was fully capable. And I also knew that I didn't have a spiritual deficiency. And throughout my times of deepest depression, I have had some of the strongest times in my walk with God because I feel so totally alone, and he's the only person. He's God. He's not a person, but he's the only person that's there for me, you know? And, so yeah, that's how that was received. So when I've been outspoken, I have received pushback. You know, there are times when I'll open up in maybe, you know, small group or Bible study or whatever. And I've just had people say to my face things like, well, have you ever tried to, you know, have demons removed from you? And I'm like, I don't think that's the problem. Or, you know, other people who have said, are you sure that you're not struggling with a sin issue and that this is caused by a deeper sin issue in your life? And it's like, nope, I don't think there is, you know?
No. Yeah.
And at times it makes me second guess myself. Like, well, maybe I do have a sin issue that I'm not aware of. But it's like after spending time in prayer and examining my life, that's not it. It's just, I'm just sick, you know? And sick people don't typically get sick because they have a sin issue. I mean, we wouldn't say that to someone with, you know, high blood pressure. Well, do you have a sin issue? We'd be like, oh, that's terrible. You should take some medicine for that. And so that's what I do.
And that actually, I was thinking just that too. I was thinking of the story John tells of Jesus encountering the blind man and the apostles asking him, well, what did he do? Like, how big was his sin or his parents' sin that he deserved this? And he's like, no, God is using him in a different way. And, you know, you know, I'm hearing more and more of that thinking of, well, you must have done something in your past. And it's like, well, wait, no. And like you said, unless you're right with God, like you're going to start doubt and you're going to start questioning yourself. So that's so important that, you know, you spend that time with God and realize that, no, this is nothing I did. He's using me. He's using this in me in order to help and to tell a story.
Yeah. Well, and as I've been more outspoken, I mean, there has been that negative pushback, but there's also been so many people who have come to me and said things like, my brother committed suicide and I never understood why. And I always thought he was just doing something selfish. And now I understand how he was feeling. Thank you for sharing. Or, you know, I've been struggling with depression too, and I haven't told anyone because I'm afraid of what they'll think of me. Thank you for sharing. I feel like I can tell my husband now, you know, things like that. And so I think that's what makes it worth it when I do get that negative feedback. Or sometimes people, you know, sometimes people can just be nasty because we're humans and that's what we do. I can be nasty sometimes. But it's been really encouraging to just hear the stories of people who feel like they're not so alone anymore. because they know that they see me and they know that I have a strong relationship with the Lord. And so they can say, oh, the two don't have to be mutually exclusive, having a relationship that is strong in Jesus and being mentally ill. They're just not, they can coexist.
Yeah. And that is pretty much the antithesis behind this work that I'm doing on this podcast, was that I had always said, even if I only have one listener, and the message of the guest that I'm talking to reaches that person to show them that they are not alone, then I'm doing God's work. And, I'm doing it all, just to glorify him and to share with people, men and women, that you are not alone. And, when somebody plugs you into their ears, it's a very personal relationship that the listener is having with both of us. And, it's such a strong message, I feel, because like you said so many times, and I've had it myself, where that if I give, part of my testimony, or I'm giving a talk, when women come up to me, and even men sometimes come up to me afterwards and are like, wow, like I didn't realize it. And, unfortunately, my family has been touched by suicide far too many times than I like to even, think about. But, it gives that whole new perspective of what somebody might be feeling or going through. And it's such a beautiful gift when somebody comes up to you like that and shares that personal moment with you, that we have to treat that tenderly. And we have to remember of all the stories, all the evidence of what Jesus did, and, treat that without any shock, without any judgment.
Yeah, for sure.
On what that person is sharing with you. But I want to talk to you a little bit about, one, how you met your husband, and then two, when in your relationship did you talk about this and what that might mean as a married couple?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I met my husband in middle school. Yep. So we are not sure when we exactly first met, but we think we might have had a class together in 7th grade, and we've known who each other are for a long time now. And then in high school, we became really good friends, but we weren't dating. He was not a Christian. He was not, he was not a Christian. And so, it wasn't even to me, it wasn't even an option to think about dating people who were non-Christians. So I just didn't really think about him that way. And then around the time that I got sick, really sick, and went to the hospital is when we started dating. So, which was in retrospect, poor choices. We should have waited until I was a little bit more stable, but you live and learn. And so he's kind of been there for all of it. And even in high school when we were friends, we talked about my mental health a lot. He was someone I relied on when I was having bad days. And so there never had to be this moment of hey, guess what? I'm depressed. And so that's a blessing. But navigating a marriage when you have it's a pretty severe diagnosis,
Yes.
I'm not saying that there's not severe mental health diagnoses, but that's a different story. We don't even need to go down that rabbit hole. But it's a severe diagnosis. And so living with a severe diagnosis, there can just be a lot of ups and downs. And so I think marriage is made up of two really good forgivers. Somebody told me that once, and I just think that's really, really, really true.
That's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, isn't that gorgeous? And so, but that's really what it is, because when I'm having a bad day, sometimes I just can't see past the next 5 minutes. I'm in it and I'm feeling really bad, and I can't see past the next 5 minutes how it's going to get better. And Sam has been so amazing to just hold space for those moments, and not to say that it's always easy, and he's I mean, it's not like he's always like, oh, it's okay, honey, let me just hold you. Like sometimes he's really frustrated because I'm out of control and he doesn't know how to get me back under control, and he's overwhelmed and he's scared because he doesn't know what I'm going to do. And so I think just giving a lot of grace is what has gotten us through, because he has to give me a lot of grace when I'm out of control, and I have to give him a lot of grace that he can't read my mind. And he doesn't know. Sometimes I don't know what I need, and so why would he know what I need, but that can still be lonely to feel like nobody knows what you need and how to help you when you can't even help yourself. And so I don't know, is that the answer you were looking for? Or
Yeah, no, that's fine. And that's honest. And I love that. I love the fact that, you've known each other for so long. And so he has actually seen, the progress and the growth and the changes in you, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, there had to be a lot of the years between, let's say like 19 to 22 were the hardest, which has been the bulk of our relationship. We started dating at 19. We're 26 now. So, it was really, really hard because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to deal with my emotions in a healthy way. And so therapy was huge. I mean, I have probably done like 12 times more therapy than the average person who attends therapy, but it's so transformative for me. And one of the biggest things that was helpful for me was group therapy. Attending with other people with mental health diagnoses. And I did a really intense outpatient. There was one winter, and I was like, I'm not going to make it through this winter without ending up in the hospital or just not ending up here at all. So we need to do something, and I don't want to go to the hospital. So my husband said, okay, let's put you in outpatient therapy. So what it was is I went to a group therapy for 3 hours a day, 3 days a week for 3 months, which is a lot of therapy. But it was super helpful. And I learned so many coping skills about how to take care of myself and not depend on other people to do that for me, because at the end of the day, they can't. And I had to learn how to self-regulate my emotions, how to stop myself from getting to that out of control place in the first place, how to deal with anxiety, how to, so many things. And it was life-changing. It really was. I mean, I was so much healthier of a person after I got out of that intense rounds of therapy and then of course I kept going to, one-on-one therapy ever since, and so that was probably 3-4 years ago now. So I'm kind of rambling, but all that to say that becoming a healthier person gave us a healthier relationship, because as I became a healthier version of me, it was easier for our marriage to thrive, because not only could I take care of myself, but I could also ask him for what I needed. And I had verbiage to go along with how I was feeling and what I needed to do to get back to an okay place. And so a big part of that for me is like, when people ask me, what can I do for myself? Like I'm struggling with my mental health. What do I do? The biggest thing I tell them is you have to be your own best advocate, because I think sometimes it's easy with mental health to feel like you're helpless, because you do feel helpless. You feel totally helpless. You don't know what you need, and you don't know how to fix it, because if you knew how to fix it, you wouldn't be feeling this way. And so it's easy to feel like you're just floundering and someone else needs to just come in and wave their magic wand and make you feel better. But that's, unfortunately, as nice as it would be, that's not how life works. And so you have to learn how to advocate for yourself. You have to learn how to say, I need help right now. And, I feel upset about XYZ and I need XYZ to fix it. And part of that is knowing yourself, but part of that is also just standing up for what you need, because at the end of the day, you are the only one who really knows how you're feeling and what you need. And so you have to voice those, because other people can't read your mind.
Especially with the bipolar, because your highs and lows are so extreme that you have to be able to speak up and to say, here's what I need, or to call your therapist and say, I need to get in there. I need to be there in an hour, or guess what? These meds are not working for me anymore. We've got to meet this week so that we can talk about this.
Absolutely. And I mean, the the health system in this country has deep flaws.
Yes.
And so a lot of times you have to fight to get the medication and the treatment that you need. And so I can't even express to you how many times there have been where I need some meds or I need a refill or my prescription's not, my dosage is wrong. And I have to spend hours and hours on the phone fighting for myself to get what I need. And it's exhausting because you're already depressed. You have no energy. You don't feel like you can take care of yourself and you feel like you're at the end of your rope. And so then take that person and put them into a stressful situation. It's horrible. But that's the time you just have to be your own best advocate, because what's the alternative? It's nothing good, you know?
Exactly.
And so for me, a lot of times it looks like saying, hey, I'm alone today and I feel really bad and I don't feel safe. Can you come over and just sit with me? Just hang out. I might not do anything. I might not say anything, but can we just like hang out and watch a movie because I don't feel safe today? And that's not fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun to feel like you need a babysitter, but it's more not fun if you hurt yourself. And so, you know, that's a small way that I constantly advocate for myself by saying I'm not okay today and I need someone to come hang out with me.
And what a blessing that you have an inner circle of friends and family that you can call on to do that, that are going to walk in and be like, okay, I'm coming over. I'm in my sweats, but I'm coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of times with any kind of illness or tragedy in a person's life, we say, hey, what can I do to help? Or let me know if you need help.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's not the best thing to say, because a person who's drowning doesn't have a lot of extra space to be like, oh, it would be really nice if you could bring a casserole tonight. Just bring the casserole. Don't ask. Just be like, hey, it's Tuesday and I bet you're hungry, so I'll bring you dinner, you know? Or just come over and say, hey, I noticed your dishes are in the sink. Let me just wash them for you. And I've had so many wonderful, amazing friends and family who have taken the initiative to do those kinds of things. I have a really good friend who last year I was really struggling in the springtime, and she was like, okay, 2 days a week, I'm going to bring you dinner. And she showed up, and she never stayed to visit. She had a busy life. And that's okay, because I didn't necessarily need her to visit. I just needed to not worry about what was for dinner 2 times a week. And so, you know, there's small ways that you can show up for people to help them along their journey. And I think a lot of times it is about just taking the initiative and saying, you know, I don't really know how to help, but I feel like this might work, because it's not going to hurt, you know, to show up with a meal, or to come by with a gift card for their favorite coffee shop, or to send them a card. It can be hard when you feel like you don't know what to say or do, but doing something is always better than doing nothing. Yeah.
Or even just sitting in the same room. You know, like, like I just talked to a guest I had on talking about grief and sorrow and loss. And, you know, we were talking about, especially when you're left alone, I just need the presence of another human being in this room. I don't need to talk. Like you said, put on Hallmark. Let's watch a Hallmark movie. I don't need to talk. I don't need this to be a therapy session. I just need somebody there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that can feel very hollow to those of us who've never had to ask someone to do that for us. It can feel like, well, that's not really that helpful, or like, I feel awkward about this. And it is kind of awkward, but again, it's always better than doing nothing. It's just, I think, you know, they call mental illness the no casserole illness, because if you hear that someone is struggling with mental health, nobody's going to start a sign-up sheet to take them meals for the next 2 months. You know, it's just not what happens with mental illness. And because people, it's a taboo topic. People don't know how to talk about it. People don't know what to do or how to help. And I think sometimes they feel afraid of saying the wrong thing, or making it worse by saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But there really is not a wrong thing other than telling them mean things about themselves. I mean, really, like, as long as you're just encouraging them and building them up and showing them that you care, there's not a wrong thing.
Yeah. Or even just praying with them. I mean, the power of prayer is just, I wish there were so many more people who understood that. You know, just even like you said, drop a note. Hey, guess what? You know, you crossed my mind this morning in prayer, and I want to let you know that I'm praying for you. That can go so far in somebody's life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I have a girlfriend who we would call and we would just pray on the phone that way. She would just call and she'd say, I really need a prayer right now. And we would just pray together on the phone. And sometimes it was long prayers. I mean, we would both be just crying and, it's not always convenient, but it is always helpful. And I think Jesus was never in a hurry. And so when people come to us in need, we should stop hurrying and pay attention to the people that God has placed in front of our path that need his love.
Yeah. And I just had that just this past week. I had a girlfriend of mine call me. I was out for an evening walk. The sun was already going down and we were just chatting and catching up. And then she was really struggling with something. And so we talked about it for a long time. And then, finally before we hung up, I'm like, you know what? I said, I need to pray with you. And, circling my cul-de-sac, getting my laps in, I'm out there on the phone with my girlfriend praying for her so that she could make it through the night. And it's just, like you said, it's just showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you recommend our contemporary church start to acknowledge and then approach the topic of mental illness?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
And I get that. As I'm saying it, I'm like, ooh, that's a big one.
That's a big question.
But like okay, let me think of it a different way. So what would you recommend for a church who says, you know what, we want to start some type of ministry, outreach, for our members or members of the greater community who are struggling? What first steps would you recommend they take?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first step is the simplest, but it's just to talk about it. Talk about it from the pulpit. Admit that there are probably people on your church staff who have felt this way. And I think it's easy to put ourselves in these little like porcelain dolls and set up our church leadership that way as like these perfect little things that, are beautiful to look at, but that's not the body. That's not what the church was meant to be. We're meant to carry one another's burdens. And so, my church in Boise, we recently moved to Washington. I guess I should mention that we just moved here at the start of the pandemic. So we have we have nothing here, but our church in Boise, who I still kind of feel like is my church because I haven't been able to go to church since we moved here. They were so amazing about this. And so every year our pastor, started a series called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And every year he would just preach a sermon series on all the ways that people are not okay and that it's okay to not be okay. And they did talk about, staff who struggled and how they dealt with that. And that was great. Another thing our church in Boise did that was super helpful is they started a discussion/support group for people struggling with mental illness. And maybe not even if they had a diagnosis, they just were feeling down and they were just in a rough place in life. And we went through a book. It was called Light in the Darkness by, I'm not going to remember the author's name. You can probably look that up and put it in the show notes though, can't you?
Definitely. Will do.
Okay. Yeah. I can't remember. It's two doctors, a psychologist and a medical doctor. And they created this curriculum. There's like a video series and a workbook, and then there's a book that goes with it as well about approaching depression from a Christian perspective. Because I think a lot of times the church acts like a Christian perspective to depression is don't be depressed, just trust in God more, just pray more, Yeah,
lean in.
Yeah, and this was definitely like the idea of, okay, there is a Christian way to approach this because we do have a hope and we do have a light in the darkness, and depression's not the end of the story, but we also don't have to pretend like it doesn't exist. And so it was a very balanced viewpoint. So I think things like that can be helpful. But I think also, just making it a safe environment for people to be vulnerable, not just about mental health, but about anything that's going wrong in their life. If we're a church full of perfect people, we are not doing it right, because first of all, none of you are perfect, so you're faking anyway. But second of all, that's not a healthy church environment. People should be able to come with their burdens and find hope in the person of Jesus Christ. And so I think that's a good way to approach it. Some churches do counseling ministries, and that's definitely like a bigger picture, more involved process to get started in. But you know what? If your church isn't equipped for that, maybe you can support other resources in the community that are doing the same thing, or come alongside another church who has a counseling ministry, or reach out to a local, inpatient mental health hospital and ask them, what do they need? Is there something is there something we can be providing to you? Or, just there's so many ways to get involved. I mean, think of how you would get involved with any other cause your church wanted to get involved in. Mental health is no different. But really, I think the biggest thing is just breaking down that stigma and allowing a place for people to say, I'm not okay right now, and not feel judged and not feel like somebody's marking down their marks for Christendom. And, you're not as good of a Christian. You got an F in Christian this year, for struggling with mental health. I think that's the most important thing. And I think that has to come from the top down. If the leadership is vulnerable and honest and accepting of people with mental health struggles, the church body will follow. But because I think in church bodies, we're diverse. We're all going to have different perspectives. But I think when it comes from the top down, it creates a culture of safety, and it creates a culture of vulnerability that is contagious within the church body. And it creates a healthier church overall, because again, it's not just about mental health. It's just about being a church that supports one another in the hard times in life. And honestly, I think life is mostly made up of hard times. It's not made up of tons of good moments with a couple bad ones in between. I would say most people have more difficult times than they have easy times. And so let's be a church that supports people through that. Big C church.
Yeah. And that's lovely. It's interesting that you bring that up, because just recently during one of our sermon series, one of our pastors, he's a very loved, young, energetic pastor, he's always being made fun of because he's always dressed like to the nines. But he was up on the pulpit and he was preaching one Sunday, and he talked very openly and honestly about his battle as a young man with depression, and the day that he literally was within seconds of ending his life. Mm-hmm. And like the amount of people that were waiting to talk to him afterwards was immense. It's like nothing I've seen before. And so I think what I feel, and I agree with you 100%, that it needs to start at the pulpit. And what happens then is it then removes the taboo. It removes that, I've heard it referred to as sin shock, what? You did what? Or you were thinking what? And, when they see our leaders being vulnerable and see that, they're humans. Mm-hmm. And they struggle, that really goes a very, very long way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's a whole other podcast that could be talked about depression and suicide rates among pastoral leadership in the American church. And so we know it's happening, and our pastors need that safe space too. They don't want to look like perfect people sitting at the pulpit every week. That's stressful. Yeah. And that's only going to make things worse. And so I think it creates a healthier church body as overall. And then I think the other thing that churches can do is encourage therapy and make it destigmatize the idea of getting help, because we all need help, even if you don't have a mental health diagnosis. Yeah. And so I think that's one thing. And then also destigmatizing the use of medication. I know I've met a lot of Christians who are like, I totally believe that depression is real, or anxiety is real, or whatever, and I totally support you going to therapy, but medication's where I draw the line because, a variety of reasons. Yeah. But we wouldn't say that to someone who took insulin for their diabetes, or we wouldn't say that to someone who did chemotherapy for their cancer. So why do we expect God to magically heal our mental illnesses just through prayer? When God gave us this medicine, maybe that's the way he has for us to be healed. For me, I take medication every day. I take 2 little pills, and if I don't take them, it's a bad, bad day. And if I don't take them for 3 or 4 days, I'm going to end up back in the mental hospital, which is, that's extreme. Yeah. But that's my life. That's just what I have been, that's the law I've been given. And, Paul talks about boasting in our weaknesses. And the thorn in his side. And God didn't make us to be perfect people who shine lights for him by living perfect lives free of problems. That's not the life we're called to here. And I think sometimes American Christianity, this is me on my soapbox, can lie to us really and tell us that that's what Christianity is all about. And it's not. It's about taking up your cross and bearing our burdens and bearing each other's burdens,
yes,
and putting those burdens on the cross. And I think God has definitely glorified himself through my story, because it shows people that there is hope and that there is a life full of Christ within the throes of mental illness, no matter how bad it is or how good the days are, and everything in between. Jesus is glorified there because he's my rock. And so I think with any struggle that we have in life, that should be our focus as Christians is, I'm struggling with XYZ, or I'm going through XYZ, or this happened to me. But like, how are you glorifying Christ through that? Because that's the purpose of everything we do, is to glorify him. And I think that my healing with medication and my healing with therapy and all of it, and the struggles and the bad days and the good days, all exist to bring glory to God. And so I feel like that's really my purpose, is to share that with other people.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And it's, I believe it was, yoke yourself to me and yoke yourself to others. But something I always like to say is I love the imagery of Ephesians and, the putting on the armor of God. When I read, I'm a visual reader. And so I can always like picture that. And I like to I have to tell myself this a lot of days. And I tell my friends this, is that there's some days that we just don't have the energy to even open up the word. And so that's when I need you to come alongside of me and yoke yourself with me so that we can share this burden together. Because there's days that I'm just not going to have the energy to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I was just thinking when you were talking about the medication, if I am a huge proponent, first of all, of any type of counseling and therapy. But then also too, if you feel the need that this is what's going to help you, that there is nothing wrong with that. And, there was a time where I was battling with severe anxiety and depression. And so I had to go on meds for a while. And it's like, I wanted to tell people, like, you don't want to see me off of this. Like,
yeah,
I'm a much better person.
Sure. It's true. Well, and I think it is important to note that not every case of mental health conditions needs medication.
Correct.
A lot of people don't need to take that step. And a lot of people might only need to do it for a season, and that's wonderful.
Yep.
People like me will be on medication for the rest of their lives. I will never be able to stop taking medication.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that makes me any less of a Christian or any less of a faith-filled person. It doesn't mean that should God choose to heal me, amen, I'll take it. But I really believe deep in my bones that he's not going to, because it's not how he's going to glorify himself through my story. That's not, I feel called to glorify him through a different way. And that is through suffering. And that's okay. That's just the life I've been called to. And, if God heals you, I totally believe that can happen. And amen, praise God, hallelujah for that. But it's not everyone's story. And so I don't think we should pretend like that's the only way.
That's great. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about this new writing project that you're embarking on. And so, from what I've read, it is going to be a focus of mental illness and faith. But is it going to be more of like a teaching testimonial where that you're weaving the science and your knowledge in with your experiences?
I don't know. Really, I'm just kind of like along for the ride wherever God wants to take me. But I am just trying to put my thoughts out there. I think that's really all I know at this point. I would like to write a book someday. I think not quite memoir style, but more like using my experiences to tell a greater story, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of like an example of a book like this, and I can't really think of one right now, but I know they're out there. So that's like the ultimate end goal that is very far down the road. But right now I'm just dabbling around on social media and just sharing my thoughts on social media, and just receiving the responses from that has been really positive, and it's just a fun hobby for me right now, and we'll see where it goes.
That's great. I just had a guest on, and she is also a fellow called Creative, Heather Enright. And she just came out with her 4th book, Sewing in Tears. And what she did was she unpacked the story of Ruth by seeing God as the ultimate redeemer. And did just like you were talking, kind of wove a little bit of her personal narrative into it, but really the focus of the book was just the biblical perspective on it. And it was a beautifully done story, a beautifully done book. I'm so happy and honored to be calling her a friend.
Oh, that sounds so great. I'll have to pick up a copy.
Yes. So aside from just dabbling in your hobby, what's next for Caitie Fredrickson?
I don't know. We just moved, like I said, we just moved here to Washington so that my husband could pursue further his education, studying Old Testament and Hebrew. So I am I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. And so I like to have a plan, and there is no plan right now. The plan is get my husband through college, and see what's on the other side. And he wants to go on to do doctoral work. And so we have quite a long educational journey ahead of us.
Yes, you do.
So, I had ideas about what moving to Washington would look like. I've lived in Idaho, other than those couple years at college, my whole life, and my whole family lives there. And now we're just out on our own doing new stuff and
being adults.
Then a pandemic happened. Yeah, exactly. And we didn't expect to do this in the middle of the pandemic. And we actually moved into our new house on the same day the stay-at-home order was issued. And so it's been a very different experience. So what's next? I think I'm just trying to fight against my one ways and go with the flow and take each day as it comes. And I would like to get a book proposal done. That's kind of like my stretch goal, I guess. My stretch goal is to do it by the end of the year. I don't think that's going to happen. But that's kind of my next goal. Otherwise, I'm enjoying my job as the property manager in Boise. I mean, I work from here, but my company's in Boise, and, having fun there. And, I don't know. I don't know what's next. We'll see whatever God has in store, which probably means it's going to be crazy. That's the way it goes, right? So
it usually is.
Yeah, for sure. But Sam just started. His first day was on Monday. And what day is it now? Thursday. So we're like right at the beginning of this great new adventure, and we're just going to see where life takes us. And I'm, as long as we go with God, it should be good, I guess.
It will be.
That's what he says. I'm trusting.
That is awesome. So how can people connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, just at Caitie, Caitie, Writes, Writes. And that's it. That's where I am. So you can find me there.
It's putting all your eggs in that one Instagram basket. I love it.
I am. I'm just dabbing my toes in, because really at this point I've shared a little bit. I did some community events back in Boise, sharing my story, and I've spoken a few times, but it was always more like, oh, this is just something cool I got asked to do. And so now is my first time just saying like, okay, I think I'm going to not wait until I get asked, and I'm going to actively seek out sharing my story instead of just waiting until someone asks me to. So we're just really, like I said, I'm just along for the ride. We'll see where
I love it. Well, as an Enneagram 3, I am like jumping in the pool head first, like all in. Let's do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Got my big goals, got my lofty goals. I'm good. Let's go.
And that's how I usually am, because I want a plan. I want a list. I want to know what's coming. And so this is very contrary to my nature, actually. Normally I have like our perfect 10-year plan, and this year has just taught me that I can't plan anything. And even if I do, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's just take each day as it comes.
I mean, we can't even plan a trip to the food store right now.
I know.
What's going to happen.
It's true. So yeah.
I love it. So at the end of each interview, I ask every guest, to share 4 things that you can't live without lately. And I'm going to ask one of them to be a book.
Okay. So the first thing I can't live without lately is scrunchies. Okay. So scrunchies, I was born in the 90s. I'm super young. And I wore scrunchies as a kid, and then they went out of style. And I remember being in middle school one day, and my mom had a scrunchie, and she was like, do you want to wear this? And I was like, oh, that's so dated, Mom. I'm not going to wear that. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, scrunchies are life. Like, they don't tug your hair when you take them out, and they're cute, and you can get them with bows on them. I'm kind of obsessed. And so scrunchies are my first thing. My second thing is being outdoors. I grew up in Idaho, which is really just like an outdoor playground, but I never took advantage of it. And then we moved here, and I was like, you know what? I want to be an outdoor person. And so we have had just the time of our lives this summer. We've gone to our cabin a couple times and gone camping, and we've been going fishing every week. I've never fished in my life until this year, and now we go every week. I still have not caught a fish. The one day my husband caught a fish. This is a little graphic, so maybe if you're squeamish, don't listen. But the first time we caught a fish, my husband was trying to end the fish's life so we could eat it later, and it got horribly mangled, and I was sobbing my eyes out. I'm like looking at the sky. I'm crying to God. I'm like, God, why did Adam and Eve have to sin so that things have to die? I can't wait to go to heaven so the fish can live. Like, I got very dramatic. There's a picture of me that my husband took, and I'm literally just like wailing at the sky with my mouth wide open. It was a little bit of a drama queen moment. So anyway, outdoor time is something I'm loving. And then I'm also loving podcasts. So thanks for having me on yours.
You're welcome.
But I am just like quarantine. I have a lot more time to, I don't know. I just am finding like when I'm getting ready in the morning or when I'm cleaning the house or when I'm walking the dog, I'm just loving listening to podcasts. And I've recently started listening on 1.5 speed so that I can get through them faster. And it is a game changer. I can get through twice as many.
Yes.
And you know, unless you're listening to someone who talks really fast, it doesn't, like me, it doesn't make a difference. So I'm loving podcasts. And then as far as a book, I'm not even really reading anything right now because I'm just so busy with my job. But so I will say a movie instead is Hamilton. I am obsessed with Hamilton. I watch it all the time. I am listening to the soundtrack constantly. My sister-in-law and I are trying to learn the rap that Lafayette does in Guns and Chips, the really fast part. It's not going well. So I'm loving Hamilton. Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Caitie, thank you so much for coming on and being vulnerable and sharing your story with my listeners. It's truly been a great pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you so much. It was so sweet of you to ask me to come on, and I was excited to do it. And really, you asking me on was the thing when I was like, okay, I'm going to take the leap and just start really, really sharing my story instead of just – because like I said, I just dabbled sharing on my Facebook page, you know, and that's how you saw my post. And I was like, you know what? If Jill's going to have me on her show, that means there's people out there who need to hear this outside of just my social circle. So let's try and reach them, you know. So thank you for inviting me to take that brave step.
I love it. I love it. Wasn't Caitie great? I loved it when she said, it's okay to not be okay. Such a powerful message for such times that we are living in. Thank you so much for allowing me into your space today. I do truly appreciate it, and I am blessed to be part of your world. Never miss an episode of Feed Your Spirit podcast. Click the subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have some time, definitely rate and review this podcast. It really, truly gets the word of Feed Your Spirit out to additional listeners. Also, don't forget to follow me, Jill Dobrowanski, on all of the socials and also at JillDobrowanski.com so that you never miss an episode, announcement, or blog post. Once again, thank you for listening today. And may God bless, and don't forget to feed your spirit.